Remember vaccine passports? I do. And like many of you, I too can't believe those actually got mandated across a so-called free nation like Canada, let alone much of the world. And today I bring you a report from the highest of courts in British Columbia. It's about nonprofits who came to the Court of Appeals between October 4th and October 6th to argue that an earlier decision to have their vaccine passport challenges be dismissed be appealed.
I think the court had a concern as to who actually told physicians that they couldn't give letters based on other medical reasons. And the government was arguing that it wasn't Dr. Henry who made the colleges issued these directives, that was a decision that the colleges made on their own.
Drea Humphrey here with Rebel News, standing in front of the Court of Appeals. And on the opposite side is the Supreme Courthouse, where I brought you many updates on different legal battles against COVID-19 tyranny. You can find those updates, including ones that you came together to help make happen by donating what you could at our special website called fightvaccinepassports.com. Now, the result of some of those cases was that Chief Justice Christopher Hinkson had multiple challenges to BC's discriminatory vaccine passport be dismissed. And some of those cases wanted to have an appeal. So Jeremy Maddock, who you're seeing on the screen right now, a Victoria, BC man who self-represented himself, as well as two nonprofits, the Canadian Constitution Foundation, as well as the Canadian Society for the Advancement of Public Policy, CSAP, wanted to argue that they should be able to appeal Chief Justice Hinkson's earlier dismissal. Now, thankfully, the panel of justices who presided over this matter in the Court of Appeals allowed some of the court cases to go through. Mr. Maddock, who I mentioned was self-represented, his case did not go through, but they did hear CCF's and CSAP's case, and I'll have an update with CSAP's lawyer in this video coming in this report as well. But since I wasn't able to talk with CCF, I just wanted to let you know a little bit about what their case was about. It was arguing about that the exemptions British Columbia put forward for their vaccine passport were too rigid. There was only a handful of things that were written in stone that said if you had these things, you can be exempt, or I should say apply to be exempt. And those were things like certain cancer treatments, or if you developed pericarditis after taking the shot. But even out of their three plaintiffs, one of them did develop pericarditis. And the only type of application that she could pursue, again, apply for, was a limited one that would restrict her to have to apply every time she wanted to do an activity. So if she wanted to go to the gym, she had to apply to Dr. Bonnie Henry to ask permission. If she wanted to go to a concert or something, she had to do the same. It's completely ridiculous, especially when you developed, let's say, an injury from you-know-what. Now, the other case, which again, I'm going to talk to CSAP's lawyer in just a moment, they also argued that the exemptions were too rigid as well, but more focused on a different angle. So here is their counsel to give you an update on just that. And joining us now is CSAP's counsel, Paulina Fertula from Citadel Law. Thanks for being on Rebel News again.
My pleasure, as always.
Yes. Now, you just got out. It was a 3-day hearing in the highest of courts. Why was it important to appeal this case, Hinkson's decision?
The Chief Justice ruled on whether the orders relating to the vaccination passport regime were reasonable or not, and whether they violated Section 7 of the Charter. And we respectfully disagreed with his decision, so we wanted a higher court to review the materials and provide us with their decision.
Now, as the government usually does, or their favorite tool to try to get the case out, they argued that this case wasn't moot. Now, two things I found interesting about that. One is that didn't get the case thrown out in the first place, and here they were arguing that again. What do you think about that? Was that a waste of the court's time, or what type of strategy was that?
Well, I think it was a proper application to make. They certainly had the right to do so. from a legal perspective, it didn't really matter whether Justice Hinkson felt the matter was moot or not. The Court of Appeal had the right to make its own decision in this respect, and they felt that it wasn't moot, that there were some issues that were important that needed to be addressed. Even though technically the orders were repealed and they were moot in that sense, because of the issues involved, the court exercised its discretion to allow the appeal to be heard, even though it was technically moot.
Well, and we know we're in fall season again. We see our public health officer in British Columbia, Dr. Bonnie Henry, starting new mandates in place for hospitals with masking and such. So you never know if something like this could come back. Now, one of the things that sort of separated your argument from the other, there were 3 cases that were trying to be heard in appeals, and you're one of the 2 cases that were heard. Both of them were about how rigid the exemption regime was, but yours differed a little bit from CCF's. Tell us how.
Well, their focus was more on the medical exemptions because their clients were people with disabilities, and they had tried to get exemptions under the orders, which allowed for some medical exemptions, but they were very much circumscribed. So it was essentially, they were arguing the provincial health officer, Dr. Henry, got to decide what counts as a valid medical reason not to be vaccinated and what doesn't, and they challenged that. We challenged the orders on the basis that there weren't any reasonable exemptions for other charter violations or for other charter exemptions. So, for example, if somebody had a religious reason not to be vaccinated, or they just didn't want to be vaccinated for whatever reason, their freedom of movement was restricted, and they had no opportunity to challenge that.
Well, we certainly covered a lot of stories like that in the COVID era. People being locked down, not allowed to go to church, not allowed to go to a restaurant. One of the things that stood out to me from what I heard one of the justices say on the panel was he used the word misinformation, questioning how the public health office could have let what he referred to as misinformation go on. And that was the College of Physicians and Surgeons, the letter that they put out that really gave the impression to a lot of physicians, family doctors, etc., to believe that they couldn't even back certain exemptions, even if they thought their patient was valid. What stood out for you the most in court today?
Well, I think the court had a concern as to who actually told physicians that they couldn't give letters based on other medical reasons. And the government was arguing that it wasn't Dr. Henry who made the colleges issue these directives, that was a decision that the colleges made on their own.
Well, we have to wait for the reasoning. It could take a couple of months. We don't know. How do you think it went in court over the last 3 days? Tell us what you think.
Well, there were ups and downs, and the justices were curious. They had lots of questions. So it's hard to tell when judges have a lot of questions. Sometimes you think that they're perceiving your argument negatively, and maybe they are, but sometimes they're just trying to play devil's advocate and try to get a better understanding of what the issues are.
Well, now it's a waiting game to see what the Court of Appeal decides about these appeal requests for the dismissal of the vaccine passport challenges. Like we've been doing from the start, Rebel News will be here to let you know what happens. And if you appreciate that we get our boots on the ground and bring you these reports so you can see for yourself, you can help chip in a few bucks to make sure we can continue to do it again. You can go to rebelfieldreports.com and donate what you can. We appreciate your support.